Today, we are going to talk about Chapter 17 in the Smart Sales System, which focuses on cold calling. Cold calling is one of the most difficult tasks that a salesperson has to do. And regardless of your experience and your sales skills, cold calling is difficult for all of us. And it's something that just about every salesperson doesn't enjoy. Again, regardless of how good of a salesperson they are or how much experience they have, just about all of us don't get real thrilled about making cold calling. So if you feel that way, it should at least make you feel better that you're not alone, and that's completely normal. And what we'll talk about here today should actually make that feeling less. It might not ever go completely away where you love cold calling, but with the process that we give you today, you might be able to enjoy it a little more or dread it a little less. But one of the reasons why cold calling is so difficult is because you have a very small window of time. A cold call could be just only a few minutes long, and you really have so much information to share. I mean, there's so much that you want to accomplish on a cold call. You want to build interest, you want to talk to the prospect about all the things you have, all the different great things about the product you sell. You have so much that you want to talk about, and you have just so little time. So that can make it difficult figuring out what to say. On top of that, your prospects probably most of the time don't receive you with open arms. It's totally different making a cold call talking to a prospect compared to an inbound call where they call you, where they're much more open to receiving information. So you're really kind of calling into hostile territory, and that can be very challenging. And on top of that, you never really know what direction a call can go. Every prospect is unique. Every product you sell could be a different conversation, and this can make it really difficult for you to kind of really have a game plan and fully prepare and get really good. Now, those are the challenges that we all face, regardless of what you sell and regardless of who you are. Now, the good news is that we're going to provide you with a cold call process here today that's going to make all of those easier. And this process will help make it clear what you should say. The process will help you to manage the call and be more clear on what you're trying to accomplish in that small window of time. The way that we do that is we provide a step-by-step process that you can go through on the call, and you can learn these steps, and that can make cold calling a lot easier. Let me just show you what these steps are. So the first step is open the call, then share the purpose for the call, then perform a sales takeaway, ask questions, pain points, share some product and company info, and close for the next step. So while one thing I want to point out is that you see all these steps, there's not an arrow going from one step to the next, and that's on purpose. Because while there are all these steps, this process is not to be used going from the top and working your way, going through each step to the bottom. This is a process that you would bounce along, and that way this process kind of allows, the process conforms to all of the different directions that a call or a prospect can go. So what I want to teach you today is I'm going to teach you what these steps are, and I'm going to show you how to bounce from these steps one to another and the logic that you would use going through this process. In the last training module for the Smart Sales System, we talked about sales process, and we introduced you to the ICE sales process. I stands for ICE. I being the first step of the sales process is the interaction. The second step of the process is a real conversation with the prospect. And the third step in the process is an explanation on how you can help and what you have to offer. If you did not catch that training module, you should probably go back and watch that. That process will come into play with what we talk about here today, primarily from the standpoint of the cold call is actually the first step in that three-step process, and that's the interaction step. So what I'm going to talk about today is how to organize the interaction step when that interaction is a cold call, to kind of refresh you on what we talked about with the interaction. I mentioned that one of the challenges is that when you make a cold call, there's so much that you want to accomplish, and there's so much information that you want to share. But when you use the ICE sales process, it can be more clear to you that you don't have to build enough interest so that the prospect wants to buy and that you close the prospect for the sale of the product. You only have a few goals. The goals are trying to pre-qualify to determine, does it even make sense to talk, which would be the next step in the process, which is a conversation. And we want to build interest, not enough interest to validate that the prospect wants or needs what we sell, but enough interest to talk more, which is a much lower level of interest that we need to build. And the close is not for closing the sale. The close is for the conversation. The structure for a cold call at the interaction step, we're trying to work within a 2 to 5 minute window. This process that I'm going to show you conforms to that and works inside of that. 80% of the structure and this process is going to be putting the attention on the prospect, talking about the prospect. And then the last part of the cold call is going to be 20% on us. And the centerpiece of the cold call process is to ask a few questions. The questions we're going to ask are pain and current state questions. So that's all refresher from the last training module, but that's important because the cold call process aligns with all of those concepts. So let's get into the process. So the first step of the process is to open the call. And what I think a lot of salespeople do is they open the call and they say something like this: how are you doing today? Is this a good or bad time to talk? Are you busy right now? Do you have a minute to talk? And my advice is to not say any of these. One of the most common ones is a salesperson will ask, how are you doing today? And they do this to try to be nice and manufacture a little rapport. And the reality is that if you go back to the core concepts that we talked about in chapter 2, prospects are busy. So the minute you start to ask them how they're doing, and this is a cold prospect, so they don't know who you are, you don't know them, it's really an empty gesture, and you're already beginning to waste their time because they might say, I'm doing good, how are you doing? And then this just feels like a waste of time with someone you don't even know. Let's just scratch that. It makes you sound like a salesperson. I don't like to ask, is this a good or bad time to talk? Because we know that the prospects are busy. So we don't want to ask if they're busy or if this is a good or bad time. I do want you to confirm availability, and I'm going to show you how to do that next. And the last one is, don't ask if they have a minute to talk, because technically you want more than a minute. Following this process, you want 2 to 5 minutes. If you want to ask for the exact amount of time, you would say, do you have a few minutes to talk? This is the way I recommend you open the call, which is, hello, Michael, this is Mark calling from company XYZ. Have I caught you in the middle of anything? So replace any of what I just showed you with, have I caught you in the middle of anything? And what that will do is that confirms that they're available. It does not confirm that they're not busy. We know they're busy. So we don't want to ask if they're busy. And we don't want to power through if they're dealing with a fire. Believe it or not, sometimes people answer the phone when there's chaos going on for some reason. So we want to just confirm that there's not, because we don't want to move forward and try to have our cold call interaction if it's a horrible time. The other thing is that we want to show that we understand them and that we respect them and respect their time. So I think it's really great to ask, have I caught you in the middle of anything? The other thing about this is test it out and leave a comment on this video how this tactic goes, because we hear from all the time from our clients how much they love just this simple question, because it gets people to open up. Have I caught you in the middle of anything is something similar to what a coworker would ask another coworker when they're peeping their head in their office to chat about the weekend or to ask them what they're doing for lunch. It's very friendly, very casual. And you may say, well, I want to ask how they're doing. I'm a professional salesperson and I want to be the utmost professional. Well, that logic is great, but the reality is that your prospects are getting sold to a lot. And if you try to act professional and treat them in a professional manner, you're going to trigger guardedness. And when you do the exact opposite, which right here is act more informal, casual, and friendly, not to say that you trigger a lot of friendliness, but you don't trigger that instant guard. And actually just test it out, because it's really interesting how people drop their guard when you ask, have I caught you in the middle of anything? When you ask, a few other things this does real quick is that this will show you that you respect their time. And the other thing, that when you ask this question, it actually buys you 2 to 5 minutes. So when they say, I'm not in the middle of anything, when you don't confirm that they're not available, you will feel this sort of anxiousness, like you're trying to accomplish a lot on the cold call and you don't know how much time you're going to get. When you confirm that they're available, you've just bought yourself the 2 to 5 minute window that you need to operate in to to proceed with this process. And that can actually make you feel more comfortable and allow you to proceed forward with this process. The next step in the process is to share the purpose of the call. There's a couple different directions that you can go after you ask, have I caught you in the middle of anything? So if they say anything in the vicinity of, yeah, so you say, hey, have I caught you in the middle of anything? They're only going to say variations of 3 different things. So one option is they're going to say, yes, I can talk. And that might look like, yes, but I'm okay. No, I'm fine. And, or I'm not in the middle of anything. That's one scenario. The other scenario is that they're going to say, no, I'm in the middle of something, or no, I'm busy. And the third scenario is that they're going to say, well, it depends. Why are you calling? Or it depends what you're calling about. Or they'll say, well, what is this call in regards to? So those are the 3 scenarios. When you say, have I caught you in the middle of anything? Either it's a green light to move forward, it's a red light saying they're not available, or it's a yellow light saying, well, it depends. What is this in regards to? If you get a green or yellow light, you go to the same place. And the same place is the sharing the purpose of the call, because if they're good and free, you go to the purpose of the call. If they say, what is this in regards to? Then the answer to that question is the purpose of the call. The only time that you go in a different direction is when you get the red light, which is they say, I'm not available, I'm busy, yes, I'm in the middle of anything. When you do that, when you run into that, then you basically deflect back. And so we're going to have a whole training module on objection handling. So we'll talk about this objection and all the others that you might run into. But the response when you get that is, oh, okay, I can be really brief, or I can call you back at another time. Which do you prefer? Or you can say, oh, okay, well, what's the best time to call you back? Most likely you'll get a green or yellow light, or you'll get a red light. And that's what you do there. Let's just say that you get a green or yellow light. And so then you proceed to the purpose of the call. And let's look at what that looks like. Now we want to share the purpose of the call. This is only the logical thing to do when you end up on the phone with someone, is to share with them why you're calling them or what you're calling to talk to them about. And so if you follow your natural instincts, you're a salesperson, you're trying to sell something and you want to talk about your product. That's really the purpose of your call, right? You're a salesperson, they're a prospect. If you really truly want to actually share the honest answer of the purpose of the call, or if honestly answering when they say, what is this in regards to? You might say something like, well, I'm calling to introduce myself. I'm calling to introduce our company. I'm calling to schedule an appointment or meeting with you or the prospect. I'm calling to learn about your needs. I'm calling to share details about what we provide to see if it's something you need. I'm calling to see if you need what I sell, basically. So that's actually the honest answer. And you know, if you're a salesperson and you're in product selling mode, you might not have a lot of regret or feel a lot of shame about saying any of those as the purpose of your call. But I would recommend to not say anything close to any of those. And the reason why is because any of those will make you sound like you're a salesperson that's trying to sell something. And the other thing that's wrong with all of those is that if you go back to the core concepts that we talked about in chapter 2, we are all humans and we all care about our own stuff the most. And with that, we want to make the cold call more about the prospect stuff than our stuff. All of these reasons for the call are all about the salesperson's interest. This makes the call all about the salesperson, which the prospect will not have a lot of interest in or care much about. We want to make the purpose of the call more about the prospect. Now, the smart sales system is going to try to minimize how much you sound like a salesperson trying to sell something. We're not going to use any trickery here. While we don't want you to say any of those, and those are the reasons for the call, we're going to shine the purpose of the call under the best light, and we're going to spin it the best. So I'm going to give you 3 ways to explain the purpose of the call, and you can basically use the building blocks that you came up with in a previous chapter. As we go through these steps, I'm going to use the same example that we've used in previous chapters and videos, which is selling web design. So we're just using that script and that sales message and those building blocks to fill up this process. You said, have I caught you in the middle of anything? And they said, I know I'm fine, or what is this in regards to? Well, the reason for my call is we help small businesses to increase the revenue generated through their website, improve website conversion rates, and increase website traffic. That's the reason for the call. Now, that's of course, that you would sell something in order to deliver those benefits, but that's shining what you're trying to accomplish here in the best light. And it's not manipulative or dishonest in any way. And it's minimizing how much you sound like a salesperson trying to sell something. Let me give you a couple options here. You could use your pain points building block, which is instead of sharing improvements, you're sharing problems that you help to fix. And so that might look like, well, the reason for the call is we work with small businesses and they often have a need to generate generate more revenue through their website. Website visitors aren't converting and they need to increase website traffic. Or you can use your name drop building block, which is great. The reason for my call is we worked with an accounting firm and helped them to improve how they told their story of what they do through their website. After only 6 months, they increased their number of leads by 500% and increased their overall revenue by 20%. So 3 options there. You'd only use one of those, but that's your value points block, your pain points block, or your name drop block. And you can just plug any of those in for the reason why you're calling. And it is the reason why you're calling. You help in that way, and that's why you're calling, to see if they need your help. The next step in the process is basically a sales takeaway. This is optional. If you don't like this, you can remove this, but the sales takeaway is actually something we'll explain in deep detail in the closing chapter, the actual chapter in the Smart Sales System on closing, because it's a closing tactic. Try to, instead of keep pushing forward, you can take something away. What we do here in the cold call process is a little soft takeaway, not a real like firm takeaway, which we'll explain later. It's just a little bit of doubt as to whether or not they need what you sell. So right after you share all those, the problems you fix or the improvements you make or a customer example, you can share something like this, which is, but I don't know if those are areas you want to improve. I don't know if you're concerned about any of those areas. I don't know if we can help you in the same way. I don't know if you're the right person to speak with. You'd only say one of those. But the way that works is you share your value proposition or pain points or name drop. Then right after that, you go, but I don't know if that's something that fits with you or not. So it's kind of a push-pull effect here. And this is really helpful for establishing the call. And it's helpful for a couple reasons. One is it creates a little curiosity, because, if you, instead of just pushing something on someone, when you take it away, they start to wonder, well, how do you know I'm not a fit? Or, well, what is it exactly? And when you do the takeaway, it makes someone feel more comfortable with you, because what the traditional product selling people do is they just push, push, push. So when you do a takeaway, they start to feel their guard can decrease, and they can start to think that you're looking out for their interests, because your interests are to sell your product. And if you're only thinking about your interests, you would sell your product to anybody, maybe even people that don't need what you sell. But when you communicate that you don't know if they need what you sell, and you're going to make that sort of conditional on what direction you go here, it shows that you care about their interests. It helps you to establish the call, establish rapport, build a little bit of credibility, and it's a great way to open the call. Right after you deliver the takeaway, there's no big decision here on what direction to go. You would always pretty much go to your questions. You do the takeaway, I don't know if we can help you in the same way. If I could ask you real quick, and then you just start asking a couple questions. You really want to just focus on either pain questions or current state questions. So some examples here for this exact sales message that we created for web design. How important is it for you to get more revenue out of your website? How important is it for you to get improved conversion rate? Do you need more website traffic? So those are some pain questions. Whether or not those are the right pain questions for, this particular example, that's another subject. But what I just want to show you here is this is where you start to ask pain questions, or you could ask current state questions, which are, basically the current state questions are kind of like, if you sold a car, the questions here would be, do you have a car today? What year is it? How many miles does it have? How is it running? How often do you usually replace your vehicle? How many people do you transport in your vehicle in terms of your family members, whatnot? Those are examples of current state questions. Every salesperson has different current state questions. Whether you ask your pain questions or current state questions, which ones you ask first, or if you mix them together, that's really a case-by-case basis for each individual salesperson. And it could change from from calling one person in an organization to a different title or whatever, or maybe they answer one of your questions one way and you flip over to asking another. But the main thing here is that you can see this is the centerpiece of the call, and you really have time to ask probably 2 to 4 questions here. You see there's a bunch of questions here, and if you really built out your pain questions, you'd have more than what's here, but you have time for about 2 to 4 questions. And the number of questions you can ask kind of depends on how the prospect answers your question and any follow-up to each question. But you want to keep in mind that you only have 2 to 5 minutes to work with. So you're not trying to ask all of these. Your goal would be to basically close for the next step in the process, which is your conversation. And then you can get back to any questions that are here that you did not ask. After you ask your questions, the call can go in a few different directions. This is where you're starting to bounce around according to the different directions that the call can go. Now, that can, without what I'm going to show you next, that could seem a little complicated, but hopefully what I show you right now makes it it very simple. The way that this makes it simple is that you can see that you have a whole list of questions, and there's a lot of ways that a prospect can answer you and different answers that can come back in from those questions. So it can be difficult to know, okay, if you get this answer, go here. If you get this answer, go here. So what I want to teach you here is that there's 3 different categories of answers that you can get back. And it's kind of like getting back to like the red light, green light, yellow light. It's similar to that, which is you can get a hot response back, which is this is that there is a problem or pain. Something's not working well. And you can see here with the green, this is good news for the prospect. This is like going to a casino and you hit jackpot on the slot machine and the sirens are going off and you can see the prospect's not happy. And the reason why this is really good is because when something's not working well and your product can solve that problem, then that, first of all, in the long run, that makes it much easier for you to generate a lead and close a deal. But in the short run with this process, your goal is not necessarily to close the sale, but it's to close for the next step in the process, which is talking and having a conversation. And so if there's a problem that your product can fix, you have immediate justification for talking more. And I'll show you how you close for that. And that's really why you're asking pain questions. And your current state questions could identify this as well. But what you're looking for in all of your questions is, are things good, okay, or could they be better? And if they could be better, then there's something not working well, and that's a hot response. Let me show you the other 2 scenarios. The other scenario is that you get a neutral response. And this is either where the prospect says, things are okay, or the prospect says, I'm not sure, right? So it's not good or bad. It's just kind of neutral. And you could look at this as like a yellow light. The third scenario is a cold response. And so this is where you ask a pain question and your prospect is like, yeah, everything's great. We love what we're doing today, or we just bought something or whatever. And you can see there it's not great for the salesperson and the prospect is happy. So those are 3 categories. And when you ask a question, it's real easy. Instead of thinking about what did the prospect answer and what does that mean to me, you can try to think about, okay, was that a hot response, neutral, or cold? And so depending on which response you get can determine where you go next in the cold call process. So let's say that you get a good response, which is a hot answer. And so this is where you're happy, the prospect isn't feeling great because they have pain or a problem. When this happens, you're skipping ahead in the cold call process here. You're basically skipping the next step, which is pain points. Actually, what you're really doing is you're skipping ahead to the close because they said, oh, it's not working well or it could be working better. That's justification for talking more. You're going to skip ahead to close for talking more. Now, the thing here is before you close for talking more, you want to build a little bit of interest on who you are and how you can help. Because keep in mind, in this cold call process, it's all been about the prospect. All you've maybe mentioned is your company name up until this point. So this is where we talk a little bit about us. This is the 20% on us. And so instead of skipping all the way to the close, we're skipping ahead to the product and company info step. I'll show you what that step looks like when we naturally progress to that, but there is a skip ahead. Now, if you look at those smiley, the color emoticons in the top right, the skip ahead makes the most sense when you get a bingo, right? A good match on a hot answer. But if you get a neutral answer, you could skip ahead too. So, if the prospect says, I don't know, I'm not sure, or things are okay, you could still treat that as justification for talking more because, hey, who wants things to be okay? If things are okay, we can make them better than okay. So neutral can be justification for skipping ahead. But if you get neutral or cold and you kind of want to try to find that justification for closing and find a hot response, you can progress to the next step in the process, which are pain points. The pain points is where you actually share some of the problems you're looking for. And so a way you might transition to the pain points is you might say something like, oh, well, sounds like things are going pretty good over there. So you're beginning to maybe kind of walk away. But before you do that, you progress to the pain points and you say, but when we work with a lot of small businesses, they often have challenges with that they need to get more revenue through the website or visitors aren't converting. Are you concerned about any of those areas? So let me give you an example of how you could end up here when selling web design. We're talking about their website and they say, you know what, our website's beautiful. We just redid it about a year and a half ago and it's really good. So that might be great, but does that mean that it's converting, right? So we can basically transition to the pain points with something like, oh, well, that's great. Sounds like you guys have a good looking website. I'm looking at it right now. It does look really nice. But if I could ask you real quick, we work with a lot of small businesses and sometimes sometimes their website looks really good, but the conversion rate on the shopping cart is not what it needs to be. Are you struggling with that area at all? Or is your shopping cart converting at a good rate? Or you don't have any issues with abandoned shopping carts? And then you're putting it back on them, sharing the pain point with them that you might be able to help with. At that point, basically, a few things could happen. One is they may say, well, yeah, the website, it does look good. We're pretty happy with it, but we do have some abandoned shopping carts. Oh, okay. So that's a good hot response. So bingo, And so when that happens, you can progress to the next step, which is now you're going to try to close and you're going to use what they just said as the match of the pain point. Before you do that, you're going to share some company and product info. Or if you share the pain points and they still don't, no, our shopping cart is great. We don't have any of those pains. We're doing really good. So now you could actually go back to any questions you didn't ask. If you really want to just try to keep them on the phone instead of just giving up, you could go back to your questions, or you could begin to walk away and say, oh, well, okay. If your website looks good, you're converting, your website traffic's good, maybe you're good, and it doesn't make sense for either of us to spend too much time talking, and you begin to walk away. I will say, if you're just persistent and you don't want to give up, you could begin to walk away, but you could still progress to the product and company info. This is like your pre-close step. So you can always end up here, even if you don't get the questions you're looking for, the pain points, you can always end up here if you don't want to walk away. But the hopeful scenario is you find some justification, to a point where you're talking about you. And this is where you might say something like, well, it might make sense for us to talk. The reason why is I'm with XYZ Corp and we provide web design services. We basically design and build websites, graphic design, copywriting. We're different from other web design firms out there in that we only work with accountants. We use AI to develop layouts. We guarantee results, and could share some info about your company. So this is where you're talking about you. And it's not just, your services, but you want to talk about your differentiation, any bragging points about your company. This is a great place to share a name drop example. So we showed you in the previous training module how to build a name drop customer example. This is a great place to drop that. So right before you're going for the close, you just shared who you are, what you do, how you're different. Right before you go for the close, we actually worked with an accounting firm and helped them and I already shared, this was an option for you to open the call with. Well, if you don't open the call with this, end the call with it right before you go for the close. It can explain a little bit more detail what you're talking about. It can establish credibility, can build interest. And then right here, we advance to the close. And the close, before I show you what the close looks like, I want to remind you of the process that we're trying to go through here. The close is not to close the sale and say, do you need what I sell? We're working through the ICE sales process, interaction, conversation, explanation. The next step is the conversation. So the close here is the close for talking more. And we might even keep talking on the phone at the same time. I'll show you what that looks like. So we're closing for the conversation. And so that might look something like this. So you just shared a little bit about you and how you match up with what they need. But I've called you out of the blue. I'm not sure if this is the best time to discuss this. Or do you want to talk about this a little bit more? Are you available for a brief 15 to 20 minute meeting where I can share some examples of how we've helped other small businesses to increase revenue through their website, improve conversion rates, increase website traffic? Are you available on Tuesday or Thursday morning? Or are you available to continue talking about this right now? I'm free right now. If you are, I could send you over a Zoom link and I'll, take a look at your website and whatever. You could close. So the point is that the close is to continue talking. And what can happen a lot of times is on a cold call, you just keep talking. If they start asking good questions, you just keep talking to them and drag the cold call out. I like closing like, hey, those are great questions. I want to talk to you about that in more detail. Are you free right now? Let's spend 15, 20 minutes together. If you're free right now, let's do it now. If it makes sense to get back together, I want to put some time on your calendar. That's the close. Now, that by no means, that's the bottom of the process, but that by no means is the end of the call, because there's a few different things that can happen when you try to close. So the optimum scenario is that you're closed. They say, yeah, let's do it. And it's real simple there, right? You confirm the time and schedule the meeting, send out an invite. So that's easy to do. You know what to do there. Let's say that you get an objection or you're not able to close. Well, instead of first of all, what the product selling salesperson will do, if they say, no, it's okay, I'm not interested, either they walk away and end the call, or they just try to keep talking about their product and make the prospect interested. So I'm going to give you a couple different options here. So one is you could go back to your questions. So if they say, I'm too busy to talk about this right now, we're slammed. Okay, well, if I could ask you real quick, when you have abandoned shopping carts, are you concerned about how that's impacting your monthly numbers, right? So what I did there is I just went back to my questions. And so I'm doing that to keep the conversation going. And maybe I find an answer that gives me justification again for going for the close again, or finding a reason why he or she needs to meet now as opposed to kicking the can down the road. So the point here is not what question you respond with, is that instead of just walking away when you can't close, you can go back to your questions. Another thing that you could do is you could go back to your pain points. And this works really nice if you skipped ahead. If you skipped past the pain points because the way they answered your questions, you skipped the pain points and talked about your product and then closed. You weren't able to close. Well, now go back and talk about your pain points. Say, we're not going to make any changes right now. Okay. Well, when I talk to other small businesses, they often have conversion issues. Are you concerned at all about your conversion rates? So that's going back to the pain points. And, it might work, it might not. But the key thing here is that you're not going to close at 100%, and you're going to get objections on almost every cold call. So what this gives you a game plan of how to keep those conversations going. And if you at least keep people talking and keep asking questions, you're going to find, reasons to go back to the close and close again. And many times you'll end up at the same place, but this keeps you alive. It keeps you in the game. And that is the cold call process. Now, of course, all along that process, you can run into objections. And I've already shared some examples with you. You can run into objections at the beginning of the call, like, I'm not busy. What is this in regards to? Well, you can run into objections when you ask questions and they say, we're not interested, or what we're using is working okay. You can run into objections at the close, which is, we're not making any changes. We don't have any budget. I'm not interested. So we're going to have a whole module on dealing with objections, and we'll talk about all of those that I just told you. But half being prepared is having this process, and this is like your plan A, and your objection responses is like plan B, right? So this is plan A when everything's working great, and then you're going to get these curveballs, and either you bounce back up to one of these other sections when you get a curveball, or you have an objection response. By the way, a lot of our objection responses that we show you in the objection handling module are not unique things to say when those objections come up. The objection responses are deflections back to different sections of this process. So we'll talk about all that in that other training module. And so here's where we are on this 16-week training program. We just finished cold calling. The next module is email prospecting, cold emailing, and just looking ahead. So it's going to be 3 weeks after that module. So it's basically 4 weeks from now where we're going to talk about objections. So all that stuff I was just talking about, we'll come back to in week 10. So we'll look for you next week. And if this has helped you in any way, if you want to return the favor, you can do that by real easy. So just if you can like, comment, or share this video, you will help us tremendously on the YouTube algorithm. We would greatly appreciate it. And none of those cost anything. If you like our videos, you might want to follow us on any of our social platforms, because for years, we've been producing long-form training content on YouTube, and now we have really a daily initiative to slice and dice our long videos into 30 to 60-second sales tips and post those every morning on all of these social platforms. So follow us on any of them or all of them. And the nice thing about those is we know that it's hard to squeeze in these long videos. And so that's a really easy way to get a tip for the day. And what we do is we basically go through these long videos and just try to find each nugget and strip out all the additional, dialogue, and just get to the straight tip and share it as a daily tip every morning. If you like what you've seen here today and what you're getting out of the Smart Sales System training program, and you want more, This is all part of the SMART sales system. So the SMART sales system, SMART basically stands for sales messaging and response tactics. We believe that a salesperson's best sales tool are the words that they use. There's a lot of sales tools out there, email automation, CRM, automation tools, social media, all sorts of different tools, and that's great. I recommend using any tools you can to improve productivity and whatnot. But I believe the most important sales tool you have are the words you use, the words you say, the words you write. For example, you could have the best email drip, email campaign automation tool, but if the emails you write are all product pushing emails, you're not going to get good results out of that fantastic email automation software. So, and on the other side, if you don't use software, but you just send individual emails out, but your emails are really good, you can have even better results than the fancy sales tool. So we're really one of the only companies that does this, that really focuses on improving what you say. And not only do we give you fluffy, complicated advice around what to say, we tell you exactly, don't say this, and we make it crystal clear what you should say. So there's more about the SMART sales system explained in the book that I wrote called The SMART Sales System, Sell Smarter, Not Harder. You can get this on Amazon here. And, I just want you to know, we're not really doing this webinar series to sell books. We love seeing people buy our books, and that's great. And it's a great way to support us if you've gotten any tips out of us. But to be honest with you, we give away a lot of this training on YouTube for free. There's actually a video on YouTube for each chapter in the book. So the reason why we give away our methodology, and our methodology is all on YouTube for free, is because of the second leg of this three-legged stool that is the SMART sales system, which is a software platform called SalesScripter. We are all about helping you to know what to say, and that's what SalesScripter does. So there's an area in SalesScripter called the Sales Message Builder. A couple training modules ago on the SMART sales system, we talked about how to build your sales message. SalesScripter provides you a workflow of web pages and questions to help you to build your sales message. And the nice thing about doing it in SalesScripter is that once your sales message is in SalesScripter, your sales message is then used to fill out a library of sales scripts and email templates. And then the software also has a more advanced version that includes CRM functionality and email automation. And the third leg to the three-legged stool is professional services. So certainly we sell consulting hours. We can help you with developing your script, developing your pitch, developing your strategy, and whatnot. So that is pretty much it.